Nissan has tried to move the second generation version of its British-built Note more towards the conventional supermini sector, but it's still set to be a family favourite, continuing its role as the brand's third best-selling model. Better quality, sharper styling, interesting safety gear, and the option of a fascinating supercharged 3-cylinder engine are the highlights here, along with enough space and versatility to also ensure continued appeal in the supermini-MPV segment. As the small car market becomes more diverse, the definitions between its various niche segments become more difficult to define. Here's a case in point: Nissan's second generation Note. The original Mark I version of this car was launched in 2006 to pioneer a new category of super small people carriers, so-called supermini-MPVs, which was fine all the time that alongside the Note, the brand had its Micra to hoover up supermini sales. But that's not really the case today. Though the Micra continues in the brand's lineup, its appeal these days is very much limited to the budget end of a sector in which it was once a controlling force. It's now Nissan's tool to take on cheaper small cars from the Korean and emerging Chinese brands, but no longer really a credible Fiesta, Clio or Polo supermini rival. That role now falls to this second generation Note. Ultimately, of course, it doesn't really matter how Nissan wants to classify this model. What's important is what it offers for the money, and on paper that's quite a lot, the idea being to effectively create two cars in one. So you get the pricing and driving dynamics of a Ford Fiesta style supermini and the roomier cabin and intelligent interior packaging of a Ford B-Max style supermini MPV. Other brands have claimed this kind of thing in the past. Honda tried to do it with their little Jazz. But here, with extra space, greater comfort, new technologies and a more sophisticated driving environment, we seem to have a design that fits the bill a little more convincingly. A small car that's less limited by its smallness than almost any I can think of. Let's try it. Nissan fine-tunes all its small cars for European roads, but in contrast to the smaller Micra, the difference here is that it actually feels like it. Though the steering's light, it's also far more precise and responsive than the helm that you get in the brand's smaller supermini, and ride quality is leagues better. Yes, it's on the firm side, but broken surfaces can still be covered with a supple ease and a poise that makes you far more likely to want to take this car over longer distances. I'd think twice about a lengthy cross-country jaunt in a Micra, but in a Note, the prospect wouldn't bother me at all. A comfortable small car then, if not an especially dynamic one. The Note has never been that, but when it was marketed as a tiny MPV, nobody really cared. Now that Nissan would like it to take on Fiestas and Polos, more are likely to notice the earlier point at which the chassis nears its limits and the body starts to move about. But then this car has been primarily engineered for the overwhelmingly urban-based needs of likely buyers, who will probably be more than happy with the ride and handling balance that Nissan's Cranfield engineers have decided upon. Thanks to the stiffer, lighter, latest generation V platform you'll find underneath, it's only a useful step forward from its predecessor. Couple that with excellent all-round visibility and a tight 10.7 metre turning circle, and here's a supermini that you feel you could slot in anywhere. As for engines, well, it's now become quite common for automakers to do what Nissan has done here and switch from 4 to 3-cylinder units in their small cars in the quest for greater efficiency. The downside of that is that a 3-cylinder layout is fundamentally unbalanced and usually feels it from the moment you set off and your ears begin to adjust to what in many cases is a bit of a din. But not here. The smaller Micra uses the same power plants, and as with that car, there's a tone from beneath the bonnet so smooth and melodious that, unless someone told you, it wouldn't be obvious that 3 cylinders were beating there. There are, whichever flavour of 1.2 litre petrol power is chosen. I've got the entry-level, normally aspirated 80 PS 12-valve unit here, But before choosing it, I'd suggest you insist that your dealer lets you have a run in its pokier 98 PS supercharged stablemate. That car's badged the 1.2 DIGS, the letters standing for Direct Injection Gasoline Unit with a Supercharger, and designating technology delivering the appealing combination of perky performance with near diesel levels of efficiency. To be specific, rest to 62 miles an hour and a whisker over 12 seconds, yet a car that, if driven more carefully, can potentially return over 65 miles to the gallon and put out less than 100 grams per kilometre of CO2. In the supermini segment, only Ford's Fiesta 1 litre EcoBoost 100 PS model can match eager acceleration with green-minded economy in this way, and that car will cost you a bit more. So how has Nissan done it? Like most brands, this Japanese maker has been trying to find an alternative approach to extracting plenty of power from a small engine whilst using minimal fuel. Other makers have turned to the turbocharger to do this. The Fiesta's EcoBoost power plant is a good example of that, where an air pump is powered by exhaust gases and used to force air into the engine rather than relying on that engine to suck it in. Nissan's engineers looked at this too, but decided that they had a better idea: supercharging. Here, beneath the bonnet, you also get an air pump that forces air into the engine under pressure. But in this case, it's not driven by exhaust gases, but by a connection to the engine itself. Now, at this point, I'd usually say that you don't have to understand how it works, just enjoy what it does. Except that in this case, you kind of do, if you're going to make this power plant work for you. A supercharger, you see, is an inherently thirsty thing, and if you're constantly thrashing your note about and making full use of that part of the engine, then running cost returns will be even more disappointing than they would normally be if you treated a supermini in this way. The clever thing here, though, is that at low speeds and under light acceleration, the supercharger is automatically disconnected, and the engine's airflow bypasses it to avoid wasting energy, which is when you get those outstanding fuel and CO2 figures. As long as you understand that and keep the ultimate performance only for when you absolutely need it, you can really make this car work for you. I'd certainly recommend that petrol people try and stretch to a DIGS note variant. Apart from the attributes of its engine, you also get a standard handling pack which slightly stiffens the suspension to complement the extra power on offer. It'll help that the supercharged supplement over the baseline 80 PS 1.2 litre 12 valve version that I'm trying here isn't excessive, and the advantage in performance and efficiency is surprising. After all, without supercharging technology, an ordinary 1.2 litre 12 valve note model like this one struggles to top 100 miles an hour, takes nearly 14 seconds to get to 62 miles an hour, and despite offering 20% less power, manages to cost a small but significant amount more to run. Not that you have to have 1.2 litre petrol power in your note. Unlike its Micra stablemate, this car can offer a diesel alternative if you don't mind paying the price premium for it. It's the familiar 1.5 litre DCI 90 unit, also used by the rival Renault Clio, and capable of giving this car a useful turn of pace that isn't immediately obvious from performance stats suggesting that 62 miles an hour is 11.9 seconds away en route to 111 miles an hour. Ultimately though, you don't buy or drive this car with speed in mind, which will suit most supermini customers just fine. Previous generation note models looked neat but rather anonymous. This Mark II version, though, is a touch more eye-catching, thanks in part to a roof height lowered by 20mm to try and give it a more stylish supermini feel. At the front, you'll spot a distinctive chrome grille that seems to take a bite out of each headlight, the nicely chamfered wheel arches, and the detail lines in the flanks that help avoid a slab-sided look. Now, Nissan calls this the squash line because it was apparently inspired by the angles a squash ball takes around a court. There's not too much squashing going on inside. On the contrary, as we're just about to find out, this is arguably the roomiest small car you can buy. And yes, in saying that, I'm including in that consideration Vauxhall Mariva and Ford B-Max style super mini MPVs, as well as the conventional Fiesta-shaped super minis Nissan now says this car is supposed to compete with. In fact, you get an idea of what's to come as soon as you pull back doors that open to an uncommonly wide 90-degree angle for easier entry and exit. Let's take a seat in the rear and see how it feels. Very spacious is the answer. Though the seat backs don't recline, the whole bench does slide back and forth, providing you avoid entry-level trim. It also offers a centre armrest with hidden cup holders, and if you push the thing right back, you'll find yourself with an enormous 639mm of knee room, more even than you'd get in a huge BMW 7 Series luxury saloon. Of course, you won't always need all of that, so the bench has 160mm of fore and aft travel, and even with it pushed right forward, it's still possible for two 5'10" adults to sit in reasonable comfort. Either way, it should be possible to find the perfect compromise between space on offer for people and the packages they must carry behind. On that subject, it's time to check out the cargo bay. Accessed via a rear end characterised by an upswept C-pillar that combines with smart wraparound rear light clusters. Lift the light tailgate, and with the seats pushed right back, there's still 325 litres on offer, 20% bigger than a Fiesta or a Corsa, and 45 litres more than the Mark I note model could offer. Push that bench right forward and the figure rises to 411 litres, more than you get in a Focus size family hatch from the next class up. You can really use this space too. There's a deep compartment beneath the boot floor, and on models with a sliding rear bench, a FlexiBoard multi-level panel that can be used to divide the load area up and stop shopping bags from rolling around if you haven't attached them to the two hooks provided. If you do need more space, then pushing forward the 60/40 split folding seat backs can free up as much as 2,012 litres, a figure that no other compact car can match. And up front, well, Nissan hopes to snare a younger age of customer with this cabin, but the driving position is still quite high set and super mini MPV-like in style, while surrounding you with trim and design that, despite the brand's protestations of trendiness, airs very firmly on the sensible side of stylish. To be fair, you can see that some efforts have been made here. The glossy black centre stack with its trendy circular climate control console looks fashionable enough, but you'll mostly look in vain for soft touch plastics and splashes of chrome. Still, it's a practical cabin which makes up for its small door pockets with plenty of cup holders and a double deck glove box that neatly shuts away devices you might have connected to the USB and aux-in sockets that you'll find there. Overall build quality from the UK factory in Sunderland feels strong, and the materials should certainly be hard wearing. Most of them, Nissan says, are sourced locally to the plant, so good news there for British jobs. This being the second generation Note, you'd have thought that by now the designers would have got round to bringing us the kind of fully adjustable steering wheel that almost every other maker offers across its range. Sadly not. It can move up and down, but not in and out, which can make getting comfortable difficult if you're in an entry-level variant also lacking a height adjustable driver's seat. Fortunately, I've got one here. Now, through the three-spoke wheel, you glimpse a neat set of instrument dials with a floating style digital display in the centre, a layout which offers the option of switching on various coloured lighting driven eco functions that monitor the efficiency of your driving. Plusher models like this one get a dash dominated by the larger 5.8-inch colour touchscreen of the much improved Nissan Connect navigation and communication system, now cleverer and more informative than before. As well as operating the usual audio and Bluetooth phone functions, it can tell you stuff like weather, traffic messages and fuel prices, plus, amongst other things, find you the most efficient route, score the green friendliness of your driving, or offer you Google Center Car technology so that you can plan your route on your PC before you go, then forward the instructions onto your note. Now, Google's point of interest search system is also included, as well as access to things like flight information. And you've also got the option of including the clever camera system that Nissan now offers on this Note, this around view monitor, where the screen will display a 360-degree helicopter view overhead image to simplify tight parking maneuvers. The Nissan Note used to be a supermini-MPV, a small 5-seat runabout with a bit of extra space and practicality, like a Ford B-Max or a Vauxhall Meriva. This second generation version is more spacious, more versatile and more practical than its predecessor, but according to its maker is now apparently just an ordinary Fiesta or Corsa style supermini. You could see that as being confusing, or as an answer to your prayers. Here, after all, is a compact family runabout with small MPV versatility, but without the price, premium and potentially compromised driving dynamics that might previously have put you off buying a B-Max or a Meriva. So let's get down to specifics. You're looking at paying somewhere in the £12,000 to £15,000 bracket across the 5-door only Note lineup. So, in other words, expect a model-for-model premium of around £2,000 over a smaller, less practical Nissan Micra with the same engines and underpinnings. The starting point for the Note range is based around entry-level Vizier trim, which offers 1.2 litre 12-valve petrol power, or, if you can find the £2,000 premium, a 1.5 litre DCI diesel. Better though to start your search, as most Note buyers do, with a mid-range, a centre spec model, the kind of variant including the clever cabin flexibility features that really make this car. Pricing here begins at just over £13,000, and at this level, if the £2,000 premium to get yourself a diesel is too rich to stomach, then just £1,000 extra over the cost of this base 1.2 will get you the clever DIG-S supercharged petrol version, offering most of the extra performance and more efficient running costs that a DCI black pump fueled Note model would provide. So, does this kind of pricing really deliver on the promise of a supermini sticker figure, allied to the kind of costlier versatility you'd get from the smallest brand of MPV? Broadly, yes. It's no surprise to find that petrol-powered Note models are pitched a couple of £1,000s above budget Korean superminis like Kia's Rio and Hyundai's i20, and about £1,000 above lower-order petrol Clios and Corsas. Nissan, after all, wants to leave space for their less sophisticated micro model to sell against those kinds of cars. The only exception to that rule is when it comes to diesel power, because that's something the Micra can't offer. Which is why even the Koreans can't price a decently pokey 90 PS diesel more cost effectively than Nissan can with this Note, the £14,000 asking figure undercutting a comparable DCI Renault Clio by around £500, an equivalent 95 PS Vauxhall Corsa by around £1,000, and a comparable 1.6 litre diesel Ford Fiesta or Peugeot 208 by well over £2,000, that being the kind of premium you'd also have to find for a far feebler 1.2 litre TDI Volkswagen Polo. So, a Note is well priced as a diesel, and actually pretty well priced across the board. If we shift the spotlight onto comparable petrol-powered superminis, you can get yourself a large, versatile 1.2 litre 12-valve Nissan Note like this one for pretty much the same price as a smaller, slightly slower 1.2 litre Seat Ibiza, Honda Jazz or Volkswagen Polo, and you'd save yourself a little over a comparable Ford Fiesta or Peugeot 208. Those in search of perkier green pump motoring will find that when compared to the competition, a supercharged 1.2 DIGS petrol note doesn't quite have the same sheen of affordability as its range stablemates. But then that's because most comparably performing superminis use thirsty, dirty, old-tech 1.4 litre engines. Only a 1 litre EcoBoost version of Ford's Fiesta can really properly stack up against this Nissan here, and that car's slightly more expensive. So the Note's value proposition works in supermini terms, in which case you'd expect this car to seem an even better buy when benchmarked against supposedly more sophisticated and versatile supermini-MPVs, which is broadly true. Certainly you could save yourself £1,000 or so over the cost of this Nissan by choosing something Korean in this segment, say a Kia Venga or a Hyundai iX20, but you'd be getting a slightly smaller, less sophisticated car. Closer is Citroen's C3 Picasso, a little cheaper in petrol form but much the same price as a diesel. Look beyond that car though to some of the other popular choices in this category, models like Vauxhall's Meriva, Ford's B-Max and maybe even the Toyota Verso S, all of which offer less ultimate cargo capacity, and you could be looking at model for model savings with this Nissan of anywhere between £1,000 and as much as £4,000 depending on the variant that you're considering. So yes, potentially we're talking about a lot of car for the money here. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Note that you really want, then whichever of the various engines you choose, normally aspirated or supercharged petrol 1.2 or DCI diesel 1.5, you're going to want a reasonable level of standard equipment. So how does this car stack up on that score? Well, the base Vizia version, as you might expect, offers merely the basics. Things like daytime running lights, front electric windows, a 60/40 split rear bench and a 12-volt power socket. Good to see though that there are also a few niceties thrown in too. Things like cruise control with a speed limiter, a trip computer with an eco driving function and an aux-in point with USB compatibility as part of the 4-speaker CD stereo. It all goes to support Nissan's contention that in a Note you get around £400 worth of extra kit over what you'd see in, say, an equivalent Ford Fiesta. Having said that, like most of its rivals, this Japanese brand doesn't equip the baseline version of this car with probably the most important feature on most people's wish list: air conditioning. Though you can have it for another £650. Mind you, if you're going to pay that, you might as well find a few £100 more and stretch up to mid-range Ascenta spec, a level that probably represents the sweet spot in the range. Here you get some of the items that are rather meanly deleted from baseline variants. Things like body-coloured mirrors and door handles, a height adjustable driver's seat and steering wheel audio controls, as well as nice to have features like alloy wheels and Bluetooth phone compatibility. The main reason though for buying into the Note range at a centre level is the entitlement this gives you to a range of cabin flexibility features, all the MPV style stuff that gives this model a level of versatility you just couldn't get from an ordinary supermini. As well as front and rear armrests and rear privacy glass, that means the all-important sliding rear bench and the FlexiBoard boot storage system. Unfortunately, these elements are pretty much the only really key options that aren't limited to those with a £15,000 budget looking at the two very priciest trim levels, Ascenta Premium and Tecna. If you can stretch to a Note of such plushness, a car like the one I have here, then you do at least get a standard what is probably this model's most important interior feature, the 5.8-inch Nissan Connect infotainment screen with its navigation, Google information and audio functions. This also drives what is probably the cleverest package that you can have on this car, the around view monitor and safety shield system. Optional on Centre Premium variants and standard on top Techno models, this is very well worth having, adding in the kind of safety innovation you'd normally only expect of a top luxury saloon. So, how does it work? Well, the around view monitor simplifies parking by combining the feeds from small cameras mounted on the front grille, both door mirrors and the tailgate to create an overhead 360-degree helicopter view image that displays on the Connect dashboard infotainment screen that I just mentioned. The tailgate camera also provides further parking assistance via the Safety Shield setup's moving object detection system, alerting you to oncoming traffic or pedestrians when you're reversing out of a space. As part of Safety Shield, the same camera also provides blind spot and lane departure warning functions that'll alert you to the danger of a potential collision when changing lanes. A clever little camera then that even has its own wash and blow dry system to keep its image clear. I'd certainly want to specify this system before forking out extra for niceties like the Comfort Pack, which adds a glass roof and an iKey keyless locking and starting system, or for supercharged Techno models, the Styling Pack, which adds black detailing around the headlights and grille and smarter bumpers. At least you won't have to pay extra for the safety basics. Things like twin front, side and curtain airbags, Isofix child seat fastenings, tyre pressure monitoring and the usual electronic assistance for braking, traction and stability control. The Note has long campaigned on the basis of low running costs, and that isn't about to change with Generation 2. The supermini buyers it now targets would usually like the cleanliness and frugality that diesel motoring would bring, but by and large it's rarely worth them finding the substantial price premium that a diesel engine demands in comparison to a petrol unit. So this Note range offers a solution. The supercharged 98 PS 1.2 DIGS version uses petrol, but its figures 65.6 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 99 grams per kilometre of CO2 have a black pump feel about them. That fuel figure is within a whisker of the return you'll get from base diesel versions of rival cars like Ford's Fiesta, Volkswagen's Polo or Seat's Ibiza, and the CO2 reading is actually a touch better. Yet the three cars I've just mentioned, like most other rival diesel models in this segment, are 20% slower and run on pricier fuel. The Polo costs more too. This supercharged engine's combination of performance and frugality isn't unique in this segment. The 1-litre EcoBoost petrol engine Ford fits to the Fiesta can directly match it, but you'll need over £1,000 more for one of those once you equip it to the standard of a comparable Note. Now, it's for all of those reasons that I'll nominate this Nissan supercharged power plant as one of the very best kept secrets in this sector, an achievement all the more impressive in the light of conventional wisdom, suggesting that supercharged engines are thirstier than normally aspirated ones, not more frugal. Not here, they're not. For proof, just look at the running cost returns delivered by a Note like the one I'm driving now, fitted with the much slower entry-level 80 PS 1.2 litre 12-valve petrol power plant. Now here you can expect 60.1 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 109 grams per kilometre of CO2. Like all models, this base unit maximises its efficiency returns with stop-start, one of those systems that cuts the engine when you're stuck in traffic or waiting at the lights. And talking of congested motoring, if you are urban-based, you may well want to consider the CVT automatic transmission that Nissan offers as an option on the supercharged DIGS Note models. Other brands have managed to make their belt-driven CVT auto gearboxes as frugal, or sometimes even more economic, as their manual models. Unfortunately, Nissan hasn't, so if you opt for an automatic Note variant of this kind, your running costs will rise by around 10%. If you do want a diesel, then a 1.5 litre DCI Note will oblige by returning the range's most eye-catching running cost figures, 78.5 miles to the gallon on the combined cycle and 95 grams per kilometre of CO2. You can better play your part in keeping your emissions green and your fuel economy frugal if you keep an eye on the various eco displays provided on the dash. There are actually up to 3. I'm not really sure the Eco Pedal guide is that useful, a small circular dial reading in the centre of the instruments that offers up a sliding scale rating telling you nothing more than how far you're pressing the throttle pedal down. Then there's the Eco Drive indicator that encourages efficient driving via a greenly blue flowing strip below a blue band at the top of the instrument binnacle that varies in width depending on your driving style. Again though, it doesn't tell you much more than you already know from your right foot. At least if you decide it to be unnecessary and all the coloured graphics are quite bright at night, you can turn it off via this Eco button down here by the handbrake. Better is the Eco Score system you get if you specify the Nissan Connect infotainment screen that sits in the centre of the dash. It scores the efficiency of your driving at the end of each trip in terms of 3 factors: pull away, deceleration and cruise, also providing a graphical history of your green friendliness to date. If you've got the Connect set up, then you'll also have a sat-nav system with so-called eco routing, a feature that sees it able to calculate the route likely to use the least fuel. All this effort towards improved efficiency is certainly helped by the fact that this car is very light. You have a curb weight that can be as little as just 1,038 kilograms. What else? Well, there's affordable insurance that starts at Group 6 for this 1.2 12-valve model and won't rise above Group 10. Residual values aren't anything to write home about. Experts predict this car will be worth about 40% of its original value after the industry standard 3-year, 30,000 mile ownership period. But you can keep maintenance costs down by ticking the box for a prepaid servicing pack that for around £200 gives you 3 years or 36,000 miles of prepaid maintenance. There's no annual road tax to pay on supercharged petrol or DCI diesel models, as their CO2 returns are under 100 grams per kilometre, while even this least efficient 1.2 litre 12-valve petrol version is only going to set you back around £20 a year in this respect. Nissan used to be a maker keen to rebel against established market segments. Even today, it still doesn't have a conventional Focus-sized family hatch or Mondeo-shaped medium-range model in its lineup. But it does, in this second-generation Note, now have a car that might actually suit many private buyers in both of those categories quite well. A model that we're told is a conventional supermini, but which actually offers even more versatility than its MPV-derived predecessor. It certainly seems to strike the right chord amongst the things that usually tend to matter amongst practically minded end users. So it's easy to drive, cheap to run, spacious to sit in, large in load space, and can offer enough high-tech hardware to guarantee showroom sensation. An awful lot of attributes then to set against the fact that there are certainly more dynamic and stylish superminis out there. But as well as lacking this one's infotainment ingenuity, these cars can't offer the potential for luxury saloon rear seat legroom or the near estate car levels of practicality that are provided here thanks to this Note's small people carrying ancestry. A model then that may be trying to shake off its past, but which at the same time has been moulded by it into the kind of small car that an awful lot of families ought to be looking at. Other brands will be taking note.